This is Q&A, and I was told that was a good way to not have to say any more, but to see what people were talking about and not have it be dangerous. I don't know. I mean, I don't feel threatened. I was just, yeah. Venerable Tarth.
I had a comment.
Yeah.
I was thinking about our discussion, our last session, and I was thinking it's like two people coming with different languages, all looking at the same pie. You know what I mean? And one person has got their descriptors of their ingredients, and another person has their way of, and it seemed to me like a matter of language. And I realize now why they gave you the name experience.
Really? Experiential.
Experiential, right? Because what you were saying was very helpful to me, and I thought that I found it to be very pragmatic. And I think that where I learned here, one of the things I see as our method here is we learn these various definitions in the text that we study, and then we have to find the meaning in them. So it's kind of like coming at things from two directions. One knows what the ingredients are of the pie from eating it, and the other knows it from reading the recipe book and then making it. You know what I mean? And so I used to go through this with other things in my life where you're both doing the same thing, but you're coming at it from different perspectives. And I find this to be quite fruitful. So I wanted to thank you.
That's
my
wonderful
perspective.
Analogy. Thank you.
Yeah.
That makes me feel better. Yeah, sure.
I was wondering if it would be possible to go to back to that discussion or the question about how much merit gets destroyed and why does it, all of that kind of stuff.
Oh, the hatred, anger piece?
Yeah, the anger piece.
The text is, I think, basically it's just warning us, don't get angry, especially a low bodhisattva. Getting angry at a higher bodhisattva is very, very destructive. Yeah. I mean, once you're this is applying mostly to path of accumulation, path of preparation, bodhisattvas. But then you have to think, anger, one moment of anger, there's a whole variety of moments of anger, from, a little bit of annoyance to incredible rage. And then also moment means different things in different contexts. Kind of, the length of time it takes to do something. That's a moment. Anyway, I did find some other stuff about it, but the first thing was basically don't make it all too concrete. Yeah. Okay. So the questions of Upali Sutra speak of a case in which a monastic with pure behavior holds malice towards another monastic with pure conduct. It says his great roots of virtue are diminished, thoroughly reduced, and completely consumed. Okay, so diminish means that the result of great virtue becomes less, and the duration of its happy result is shorter, but not that all the good effects are stopped. Reduce means it can bring only a small pleasant result, and consume indicates that a result cannot ripen at all. Okay, so here, in that quote, it's saying all three things, and the three things are different. Yeah, so it could mean something to the effect of depending on the qualities of the anger, who you're getting angry towards, whether you're a person with precept, without precept, whether you rejoice at the end or don't, that any of these three things can happen. Okay. On the other hand, the teaching of Akasamati Sutra says that one of the benefits of dedicating merit for awakening is that the merit will not be consumed until awakening is attained, just as a drop of water that has flowed into the ocean will not be consumed. The Ray of Stalks Sutra states that bodhicitta and virtues associated with it cannot be extinguished by afflictions or polluted actions. How are we to understand these seemingly inconsistent passages? Saying that merit dedicated for awakening will not be consumed until awakening is attained means that this merit will not finish bearing its results until then. However, that does not mean that anger and wrong views cannot damage it. Although they cannot destroy the merit completely, they can interfere with when, how, and for how long it ripens. Nevertheless, the results of that merit, although impeded, will not finish until awakening has been attained. Anger can render merit that has not been dedicated for awakening incapable of bearing any result. For this reason, dedicating our merit for full awakening is extremely important. Saying that bodhicitta and the virtues associated with it cannot be extinguished by afflictions or polluted actions means that afflictions and karma cannot harm bodhicitta to the same extent that bodhicitta can harm them. Okay? It does not mean that afflictions and destructive karma cannot damage our bodhicitta and the virtues associated with it at all. Anger can harm our bodhicitta in two ways. We will not be able to generate new paths quickly, but we'll have to again accumulate the merit that produces them, and we will experience the undesirable effects of non-virtue. In addition to anger and wrong views in the compendium of training, Shantideva points out that other actions that damage the virtues of one following the Bodhisattva path, so these are staying with householders who have strong attachment to material possessions and entertainment, boasting about spiritual attainments we do not have, and abandoning the Dharma by neglecting the Buddha Dharma and making up our own version of the Buddha's teachings. These actions also impede our progress along the path, even if we do virtuous practices. And then there's a recommendation to also study Nagarjuna's Compendium of Sutras, because there's some passages about this in there as well.
Thank you, Venerable. I want to set that story I told right that was confusing, and also say I had mentioned that No Time to Lose, that Pema Chodron gives another definition, or he says. Here's the text. In this translation, it's on the patience chapter, right? The 6th, important. But he uses sticks as well as carrots, right? So I agree, warning you, like anger is really destructive. Oh, okay, so it says, all the good works gathered in 1,000 ages, such as deeds of generosity, and the other paramisas, and offerings to the blissful ones, a single flash of anger shatters them. No evil is there similar to anger, no austerity to be compared with patience. Steep yourself, therefore, in patience, in various ways, insistently. And then, so those first two things, whoa, big, heavy. Then, in the next ones, he says, if you're consumed with anger, you can't sleep. Like, that's kind of different. He moves like that all along the text. Verse 3, those tormented by the pain of anger never know tranquility of mind. Strangers, they will be to every pleasure. They will neither sleep nor feel secure. Okay. So there's the heavy-handed, and then, you'll have trouble sleeping too. It's like, and he does that throughout, They're really strict on the vows, and then he says, there's ways to clean your teeth, and there's ways to sit, and there's ways to look around. So there's this is a compendium of everything. Now, Chodron says, no time to lose. No evil is there similar to anger, she says. This verse The theme of this chapter, the benefits of patience and the harm caused by anger. Shantideva says no evil. I've just read that. In his book, Healing Anger, the Dalai Lama recommends using the words, switch the words, he does, hatred instead of anger. That way you can keep sort of righteous anger, you can be a little anger, but it's hatred, and that's what I was speaking out of. That's only harmful. That means to kill. Hatred is very destructive. The Dalai Lama recommends using the word hatred instead of anger. There are times, he says, when anger is appropriate, but hatred is never justified. Hatred is never justified. Anger can be motivated by compassion, but hatred is always accompanied by ill will. I find, she is saying, I find this distinction helpful. Maybe you do, I don't know. Anger versus hatred. Hatred is always destructive. Anger can sometimes. Now, I feel like I've been reading Shantideva for 2 decades. I take it that anger is just as destructive, but
I'm on your side. I think His Holiness says that when I've heard him say that when he addresses Western audiences. Mm-hmm. I've never heard him say that when he addresses Tibetan audiences.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but that doesn't mean it's not a fact of life or a fact of where we are. So how do we deal with it? And it's a real thing. Now, do you want to respond or say something before I do that story from Brooklyn again?
I'm just simply going to say I agree actually with, for me, anger is, it's, I want to get rid of it. Like no matter what the text say about all the eons or all that kind of stuff, I know for me personally it's destructive. I can think of my life, I think of all the stupid things that I have done and said, all that stuff, and knowing that it also builds up that habit. Mm-hmm. So, no. So, anger works well enough for me. No matter they say whatever it's going to do, I want to get rid of it.
You know, I think it's how we define anger. If anger is the wish to harm, then there is no good. There's no good in anger. Yeah. So it's how you're going to define anger.
Right. So this balance is. I don't see it as I think it's still an excuse.
I look at the definition as the wish to harm.
Yeah. Whether it's anger or a hatred, it's the wish to harm, and that's what's so destructive.
Yeah, to me, they're almost synonymous.
All right, from the Buddha's teaching, do no harm, to hatred's never appeased by hatred, that's the most deadly one of the emotions. It comes with this wish to destroy another. How can you be a Bodhisattva? Even on the path, you think, first one makes you angry, you want to kill them. Okay. Did that occur to me? Yes, it did. Good friends of mine, I knew the parents. The parents and I were friends, friendly enough. They were parents of my friends. They knew me, but they had moved. They had moved from Flatbush in Brooklyn to Canarsie. Canarsie at the time was having troubles, black and Jews, Had some blacks attached, Orthodox Jews, there was trouble. So because they had moved into this new community, they had new neighbors over. So I would have been all right with my friends' parents, except I went in just as the Canarsie thing was exploding, and I saw the embarrassment, almost shame, on the face of these folk I knew. And it made me so angry. I was dejected, thrown away by people I knew. Doggone it, and I just wanted to. So I'm so grateful I didn't have some kind of weapon. I think I might have used it. It's very, very damaging to have those kinds of emotions. I really want to talk to you about prison work. That's the other thing I want to be reminded. I want to talk to you about your prison work, because I've done some too. And so I was thinking, in a moment like that, in a moment, you can make a really bad decision, just in a moment. So much trouble ensues. So I'm sorry, the first story was confusing. Jews are all right. Jewish people are all right with me. Whoa. Let's don't even go there. That wasn't the point of the story. They were sitting in Canarsie and they were embarrassed to have me be a friend of their family.
How do you look at that now? Do you get angry?
Yeah. Unfortunately, no, not in the sense that I was then when I shook for 2 days.
Yeah, but do you still get something inside still hooks you?
There's a memory of how awful the feeling was, personally. I mean, I don't go up to one of the parents is still alive. We're buddies enough. We're back okay. It's the kind of thing I think that people of color experience when they are treated as the exception. But they're those people, but you're the exception. You're my daughter's friend. You're my son's friend. You've been to the same schools they have. You're not a gang member because you went to the school, and I'm the exception. That also doesn't feel good. So it's like living in parallel worlds. You can't imagine. You get up in the morning, you look in your mirror, and there's something in this tooth. But you don't have to say, I wonder what's going to hit me today. Now, I don't say that most days, too, but people of color do. What am I going to be met with today? Am I going to be followed around the store? Am I going, it's a different world. Wow. Nobody should experience that, but people do. Oh, well, that took off, but I hope I clarified the story.
Can you share how you feel compassion? Like, how do you experience compassion in yourself to other people?
I'm not going to cry about anything you asked today.
Not my intention.
I know. I know. How do I experience it? I experience it with reason, analytically. That's what I mean when I keep saying King said, you don't have to like them, but you have to love them. Because by virtue of being a human being, I know you have suffering. I can feel compassion for you. Even if you would never admit it to me, it's okay. You're a human being. There is suffering. And suffering is, I believe, of a piece. I got that from Shantideva. Reading and reading. We tend to separate. There's your suffering, there's my suffering, but I don't believe that anymore. I believe that suffering is all, pardon? I believe it's one thing. That may be sort of mystical. Suffering is of a piece, and we each live within it. And if you suffer, I suffer too. I'm not talking about the butterfly effect or any of that. I mean, really, there is suffering was meant to be that grander statement, I think. And we should help beings to be liberated from that suffering, if we can. I don't go around with any particular heavy feeling about it. It's something that I think can be determined rationally.
You mentioned earlier today, I think that in a private conversation, that Martin Luther King was going in a certain direction that even some of the black community couldn't follow because it was so altruistic. Could you say some more about that? That's fascinating.
Well, you can read, one can read Tavis Smiley's the what is it, King's Last Year. One should note that, picture time. I've been carrying this picture all day just in case it should come up. This is a photo from April 4th, 1967, that's Thich Nhat Hanh and Martin Luther King. That's Thich Nhat Hanh. That's a young Thich Nhat Hanh, 1967. Here, take it. It can go around. No, I mean somebody take it. I'm sorry, Venerable. I didn't mean for you to get up. Oh, yeah, it's a young Thich Nhat Hanh. Now, it wasn't like they knew each other well, but Thich Nhat Hanh wrote to King. You know, we're doing similar things. Both of them, each of them nominated the other for the Nobel Peace Prize. Each of them. Okay, but 1967, April 4th. Oh, at that just after that news conference, this was a news conference on Riverside in New York City, King went next door to the Riverside Church and delivered his anti-Vietnam speech. He was dead 1 year later, exactly, because there might be lots of things you're doing, but when you come out against the wall, the federal government gets you. All right, that's conspiracy theory. 1 year to the day, he was dead. Now, what he said was, you know, and I think it's one of the best speeches. You can get the speech online. That the U.S. had no business harming people in the way we were. So he came out, it was a scathing indictment of the war. And black people, his immediate, coterie of folk who had been helping him throughout all the years since Montgomery, said, now Martin, you're diluting the movement by talking about people over there. And to which Martin says, if you don't know why I'm concerned about Vietnamese people, then you don't know what I've been about all these years. I go, yes, yes, yes. But people turned against him. The inner circle turned against him. He was really lonely that last year. And he made just a couple of other speeches. But to me, it's so interesting. One of the speeches was in Chicago. He was really under a lot of duress. And he said, okay, if I'm going to be by myself, I'm going to really say what's the matter with this country. And he gave a speech called The Three Evils of American Society. The Three Evils of American Society. Just let it hang out now, right? And what were those three? But what were those three? Listen, the three evils of American society are, I'm trying to remember the exact order. The three are consumerism, racism, and militarism. I think he started with militarism. Check it out. Check it out. The cause at the hub of samsara is ignorance, greed, and hatred. Hatred, militarism, just three. Racism, that kind of deep ignorance we have. And consumerism, greed, those three. King said that. A half year later, he was dead. And he was dead from the moment he came out against the war. That just won't be tolerated anymore. You can do this other thing domestically, but won't come out against the war. April 4th, 1968, he was assassinated. Yeah. That's what you meant, right, Venerable? Yeah. So, I always saw, it was impressive to me that King talked about our interdependence. That before there was a virtual web, he said, well, if you look at this morning, just look at your kitchen table, and you think, wow, that cup, you're going to pour that coffee in. That cup was made, blah, 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 in China or something. That coffee came from, you say, we are globally connected. We are all interconnected. We are caught in right? No. Should have brought that book. I have it with. We are caught in a web of mutuality, he said. So your destiny is tied up with mine. Mine is tied up with yours. know about systemic ills, but he knew about ways of analyzing them. And that last one of those penultimate speeches in Chicago, I said, wow, that sounds so much like Buddhism. It's amazing. Militarism, consumerism, racism. Those are America's problems. Have you seen, this is far afield, but have you seen I Am Not Your Negro? Still. There's some good movies. There were some good movies this year, or last year. As James Baldwin says at the end, and he's speaking throughout, Sam Jackson is reading his voice, but often they're just interspersed with clips of actual speeches that James Baldwin has given. But at the end, his last ending line is, you see, I know perfectly well who I am, but you've had the need to create this inward, and it's up to you to figure out why. Whew! Yes, sir, still the same. That message is still pertinent today. Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. And it's also clear that people are coming around in the last 10 or 15 years to acknowledging the fact that if you're going to make any progress on racism, you need to talk to each other. And white folk need to talk to white folk. You need to do that bit of education. You need to talk about white privilege to people who are going to be defensive about it. You know, I didn't have any part in that. My folk never had slaves. That's not my business. Don't blame me. We are all complicit. We all live in the society. Oh, well, that went off from where? Pardon? Absolutely. No, I know.
But the pain is...
We are all suffering together. Who asked me about, was it you, about DeGrew's book? Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. There's a book by a social worker and psychologist teacher at the University of Portland, Washington. It's called Post-Traumatic Slavery Syndrome. The legacies that it has on blacks and white in this country, that's for generations have influenced our behavior, even when we are totally unaware of it. It's stunning. Such good work. I'm so happy there are people who do that kind of work. And Tim Weiss and Rosenberg, who talk about white privilege, and who say, let's educate one another. That might mean, like Tatum, I have to go off and talk to my folk, and you go off and talk to your folks, because otherwise people of color feel like when they come into a group, and they're usually the fewest, then they become the spokesperson to educate everybody else about our plight. That's unfair to them. Mm-hmm. And so I think the first thing, so maybe I will come back and do this workshop I'm going to do, teach it for 3 weeks at Maitrapa College in Portland. Making the invisible visible, exploring our biases, and good reading, good films. So Tim Weiss and Rosenberg, these essays on white privilege. Everybody, first way to gain wisdom, study. And more there are sources there you can read that are just for you. When you have work to do, we have work to do. And we probably need to do it separately for at least a time before we come back together. I say that with love in my heart. We're all suffering. We all suffer.
I moved to this country when I was 17. And I had a hard time understanding or relating to or even seeing white privilege. But over the last 2 years, I think, since the rising of Trump and his movement, with the rhetoric, anger, and hate so directed towards immigrants as well, it began to be very clear to me what white privilege was referring to. Because I began to be afraid. I began to notice whether people looked at me and how they looked at me. I began to have a low self-esteem, or kind of begin to sort of think that maybe there was something less about me or my group. Began to realize that I stood out wherever I went. And then I began to realize how those feelings can actually impact how one moves in the world, how one relates to others. Not that I actually allowed myself to surrender to those feelings, but rather I noticed them. And it brought me a lot closer to the African American experience, because then I was living it myself. And it also created a stronger identification with my group out of a bonding arising from the hatred of others. And so then I also understood a little bit about the African American, I would say, their attitude as a community, as a group, and how they have been impacted as a group, politically, economically, and socially. And so even though for me it was scary, it was also the beginning of a deeper appreciation for what history has, how history has molded the relationship between African Americans and Caucasians in this country, and now is molding that relationship as well in terms of the immigrant population and immigrant groups. And it doesn't, it certainly does not cement understanding and cooperation or collaboration. So I hope that somehow that can be changed, somehow that can be addressed. And I'm glad to hear that there's been a lot of activism around that people have been mobilized and groups have been mobilized to speak about the values that this country was actually founded upon, and that seemed to be the vision of the founding fathers of this country, that we don't devolve into fighting each other, or hating each other at least.
Thank you. Very eloquent. I think we have to hope, given that Trump is in the White House, besides hoping that one day we'll find out that each one of them has been impeached or whatever, we have to hope that there is a good side to this, that people recognize these things and bond together across those lines. You know, I've seen it start to happen with the women's marches and people going to the airports, and so that may be something good coming out of this, what I consider a terrible thing, that Trump was elected with all his cadre and yeah.
I wanted to connect this back to anger.
You do?
Because, well, I do. Well, journey through it. So,
Venerable. I had that behind the picture.
So, kind of growing up, and you've kind of touched on a lot of it. I've had like a lot of generalized anger, right?
And
And
yeah.
so because of all the things you talked about, and then there was there's a retreat I attended here, and we were talking about anger, and I started crying because I finally realized that I was not anger. I was not my anger. That anger was not me, and anger not like this. I finally realized that I did not have to be angry. That I was not an angry person. I had anger, but I was not that was a huge revelation to me. A huge revelation to me. And so, so if we kind of flash forward a little bit, so some of the work, and maybe we can talk later, some of the work I do is around stuff you've been talking about. That's some of the work that I do. That if we flash forward to the current political scene or whatever, one of the things that really helps me is thinking about the incredible suffering that people are bringing upon themselves by not only their views, but acting out those views. So even as a person who may be specifically targeted for some of those things, I still can really come back to the fact of like, wow, look at what it is that they're creating. So it's just, I kind of just wanted to mention that in terms of like, it's really possible to go from just like, this is me, anger is me, to, people who knew me like a few years ago.
But because you've experienced it, you can have compassion for those folks.
Yes.
You understand.
Yes.
Where they're coming from.
Yeah. I feel really blessed that I can have that kind of view and be able to transform that and not get lost in it. Yeah. And I have to work at it. It's okay.
Well, that's good. You started.
Yeah.
You started. How wonderful.
I just wanted to say that this whole these years of our political climate woke me up so much. I realized that when we elected a black president, that all of the racist yuck that was under the surface, for at least me to see, came flying up visible. And it has affected me in a very good way, because I write and call and talk to the people that are supporting Trump now. And without this whole process unfolding in front of me in such a visceral, vivid way, I don't think I would be doing what I'm doing now. And so I'm very thankful that this got the light to the light of day now, so that we can see how deep this racist habit is in this country.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad for the work you're doing. But when people use the, like, there's sometimes it's said to people of color, well, this is a post-racial society. Get over it. We had a black president, for God's sake. Woof. Yeah. All that seething hatred for 8 years from all over this nation, as well as our lawmakers who said we will obstruct everything he tries, absolutely everything, right? All that for 8 years, and then Trump comes along. Yeah. Now we can do what we want, and people are frightened. And so we brave bodhisattvas. What can we give? Courage. I could see people around Atlanta saying, okay, we're going to go to those airports. We're going to fight these immigration, this Muslim ban. People got galvanized, They got ready to be supportive and be allies. And, some good things came out of it. It's still coming out of it. That's good.
I'm very interested. You said that suffering is of a piece. It's something that's shared. It's collective, and it reminded me of the Buddha when he spoke the first noble truth. He said suffering is to be known, or something to that effect. He was saying it in a very impersonal way, and also, I guess some of the biographies I've read of him. When he first came across the four heavenly messengers, I believe, the old person, the sick person, the dying person,
The four sights.
the four
Yeah,
sights.
so I got real conversion experience. Yeah, what is that?
And
It's an old person.
From what I've read, he didn't say, "Oh, I have to go out and save everybody from experiencing this," and he didn't say, "I have to stop myself from experiencing this." He said, "I have to stop this in general." So there's this division between self and other, which I think is at the root of ignorance, and it's one of the things we see in a dualistic way.
Separately,
Right?
As
We see
separate.
discrete objects. So then, one of the ways of dividing the two paths or the two main traditions in Buddhism, Theravadas or Hinayanas, fundamental vehicle followers, they seek liberation for themselves, is kind of the general way of looking at it. Whereas Bodhisattvas, Mahayanas, they seek it for others, for the benefit of others. They seek enlightenment to help others. And then you hear language such as, others before my self-interest. And I've always had trouble reconciling this language personally because, to me it seems that this distinction is artificial, self and other, and that, if you pursue an end to suffering, you're naturally pursuing your own self-interest and the interest of everyone else at the same time. But then I do understand that if the different paths that you follow, it will end in a different result. If you're an arhat, you will achieve your goal, and then it sounds like you really won't have motivation to keep going forward. You'll say, okay, I'm done. That's what I want to do. And to my mind, I say, how could that happen? You reach a point where there's no distinction between self and other, and why would you just stop there when you could go forward and just be of benefit? So these things that just go around in my mind, and maybe I'm overthinking it, but I think it's a shame that there's this split between the two Buddhist traditions. That one is sort of self-focused and the other is other-focused. And is there a way of reconciling these two things? Because, I happen to think, and like you said, suffering is one thing. And, there's no self-interest. There's no other interest. There's only the well-being, maybe of all sentient beings. This is where compassion comes from, why we feel compassionate for other people.
I think
we're
so.
connected.
I couldn't say that well earlier, but yeah.
We're not separate. So I don't know if, I just wanted to share my thoughts, and maybe you have some knowledge about, this language about, self versus other, and how that's evolved, and how Buddhism has evolved.
Well, then that just got really big at the end. Reading Shantideva, one day I got this, it was like hearing him for the first time. The suffering is of a piece. So that was just, just reading a little insight. I think it's true. But the history of the different schools and how they are focused and what is actually the outcome, I'm not prepared to say. I'd like to think that anyone who attains the sunum bonum for the Theravadins will automatically have this kindness, this compassion for others. But I think what is being emphasized and it's Mahayanas who are emphasizing it, they're emphasizing that one's motivation is paramount. So they're just trying to get us interested, to have us think about, I think, others from the beginning. That's all. I think that view from the beginning. There are these exercises, His Holiness often says, one of Shantideva's exercises, sitting there, here's me, and here's 7 billion people. Logically, with reason. Now, which one should be most important? Me? Just one? Oh, 7 billion. Oh, I think 7 billion more important, he says. And he says, we should train ourselves that way. We should go through these practices. But suffering being one of a piece, for me, I don't know. One day I got an insight that I think, yeah, that's what the Buddha was saying too. There is just suffering. Don't split it and weigh it, and yours is greater than mine, mine is greater than yours. Being suffer. Somebody asked me once after I was giving sort of a talk like this, a Zen practitioner, Roshi actually came up and said, so Jan, no offense, that's how I remember what people said to imitate them. But, sorry. But it was something like, Jan, then do you think I should try to think like black people? And I'm going, no. I think you should just think, you know examples of suffering, right? And we know examples of suffering, but the suffering is suffering. Just deal with your own, I said. Just deal with your own. It's the same. It's the same. It's not about weighing it. But the Buddha said there is suffering. I think that's big suffering. I think anywhere we enter that, we make an impression. Anywhere we try to relieve it, we make an impression. That gets a little mystical, but that's just how I see it. I wish I had better words to say it.
I like to try to think of it like an enormous wheel. You could call it the wheel of Dharma. Just this enormous wheel. And there are cogs in the wheel. And like they say, dukkha is unsatisfactory, like a wheel that is, out of rotation.
Mm-hmm.
And that I am one of those cogs. And there's 7 billion other cogs in that wheel. And I'm not in the center of the wheel. I'm out on the periphery like everybody else. And I have a responsibility to make sure that my cog is functioning properly, while at the same time addressing, the suffering of all the other cogs too. So that even if I fix my cog so that it's a good cog, if there's all these other cogs that are not good, it's going to affect the wheel, which is going to affect me too. Mm-hmm. So I'm just one of those 7 billion, or if you put all the other sentient beings in, there's way more than that. I'm just one of those. So I have a responsibility to keep my cog in good working order, but I also have to help other people do the same thing, because if their cogs are not working well, that's going to affect me too. Okay. So there's your self and other, There is no distinction.
Let's have a smooth ride.
Let's have a smooth ride, exactly. Exactly. There's your distinction, no self and other, because we're all on that wheel. It's one thing my dad taught me. I learned a lot of this stuff even before I met the Dharma. And my dad used to like to say, everyone is the same. And, if you can find somebody who doesn't smell, then that person is better than the rest of us. But all of our smells. So nobody is any better than anybody else. And our president, his smells too, just like everybody else. Mm-hmm. So we're all the same.
Well, would that everybody felt that way. But even though I agree that race is a social construct, racism is real. It's a real systemic thing with consequences, with power dynamics. So just want to be careful that because we know that, we don't use it as an excuse that we don't need to do stuff in the world. But you're absolutely right, and it's a good analogy. Though that's some wheel I can't imagine. But so there's a PBS DVD, PBS series, 3-part series on. It's called "Race: The Power of an Illusion." Illusion, because there's no genetic basis for saying they're different races, right? They're liable to be many more variations within one ethnic or cultural group than there will be across. I mean, there's no scientific basis for this claim. But there are social realities and systems that have been created based on the color of skin and the fact that black people didn't come here as immigrants, but were brought against their will, and are easily recognizable. Whew. Gee whiz, and all the social systems that got structured based on that still impact us today. I've written pieces where I say, we know how to meditate, us Buddhists. We really ought to focus on this. We ought to focus on race and racism because we know how to meditate. We have safe environments. We ought to really look at that thing. It would be good all around for all of us. I think. It's really insidious. Insidious? Yeah. Insidious, this thing we walk around in. That has consequences for me, but not for you. Does anybody know Louis C.K.? I didn't know him before, a comedian. Oh, look online at his piece on YouTube. It's called The Benefits of Lightness. It's funny. You have to mix some fun with this stuff. It gets deathly serious otherwise and heavy. But Louis C.K. does a monologue about the benefits of being white. I could go into outer space. I could go into the year 90, and I'd be welcome wherever I am. They said, come right on in. Got a table ready for you, sir. Just because white skin. Oh, further comments here. Another one?
Well, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Oh, soak today. Sorry.
Just a quick remark. I'm white, but I'm Jewish. So that doesn't stick out there, but that
something
certainly
about
impacts a lot of my, my feelings and thoughts.
Lovely. Well, I was almost afraid to come in this time. I didn't know where we were going. Oh. But this is a discussion I think great for Buddhist communities to have. Shoot, this is deathly serious, this stuff. I trust you. Hopefully you trust me. We can talk about it. Oh, yes.